Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the New Media Podcast. I'm your host, we hope you enjoyed the last episode because, as always, today is going to be an even better episode. I got the whole crew with me. Everybody's in the house today. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the news coming out of Denver about Russell Wilson being benched and potentially cut from this Denver Broncos team. We'll also then go ahead and talk about the Baltimore Ravens putting on a beat down against the San Francisco 49ers. We'll talk about the Miami Dolphins and then finally getting a win against the team above 500. We'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and their struggles. And then, of course, we'll go ahead and close out with the Dallas Cowboys and their struggles as well on the road against good teams and whether or not we believe they're a threat in the NFC. But, of course, before we jump into all of that, temperature check, how's everybody doing today?
I mean, feeling good, man. You know, my team got a win. You know, Lenny Panthers scored 30. They haven't done that all season. You know, Joe Barry, nothing new to say there, but, you know, I'm happy about getting the win in. Our playoff odds still live. You know, we just got to win out at this point. And, you know, from there, we'll see.
We're going to break our hearts again like last year.
Y'all not doing shit, bro.
We're breaking our hearts again, man. I'm sorry. You got to hope the Rams lose 2 games. You got to hope the Rams lose 2 games.
They're going to lose some.
That's your only option. They do play the Niners end of this year, so we'll see. But these past 2 weeks, man, 2 game winners, 2 game-winning drives from Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Shout out JSN. Shout out Kobe Parkinson for them game-winning touchdowns. We back on road, baby. You know, after a long losing stretch of, I think it was 4 or 5 games, we back on road. So, you know, I'm kind of happy. Like I said, said playoff hunt. We're right in there. We're ready to go. And I think we got these last 2 games on our belt. I think we can win both.
Any playoff aspirations that I had have been thrown completely out of the window after our loss to the Detroit Lions. Any chance that we had at winning the division is gone. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be a team that's part of the top 7 in the NFC. I don't think we're a good enough team without Kirk Cousins. Maybe we took Kirk Cousins for granted when we had him healthy and locked in and ready to go. But at this point, it is what it is, man. I can only dream of what a Vikings team would look like. This current team with Kirk Cousins. But overall, man, another good week of football as the season comes to a close in a couple of weeks. I'm very excited about this upcoming playoff matchups between a lot of these teams, and it's going to be interesting to see as the season comes to a close. But of course, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it, and we'll go ahead and talk about the Miami Dolphins first. As we all know, the Miami Dolphins were a team each and every week, you know, throughout the course of this season that we were reminded that, you know, these guys haven't been a team above 500. They don't have that statement win. Tua doesn't have that statement win. Tua this, Miami Dolphins that. But this past week, they're able to put all that talk to rest, and they beat this Dallas Cowboys team that's been fairly good for majority of this season, especially late in the season. And so now they finally have a win under their belt against a team above 500. The score to that game was 22-20, a walk-off field goal. Game-winning field goal by Jason Sanders gave the Miami Dolphins their first win against a team above 500. And so with that being said, are you guys finally sold on them now being true Super Bowl contenders now that they have this win against above 500 team?
6 field goals moves the needle, man. 3 field goals above 50 yards? Like, come on, bruh. Like, what are we doing here, man? Like, I really think, like, sure, I think that, like, that last drive, that walk-off, you know, field goal where, you know, Tua had a drive, I think that was a very convincing drive for them. You know, I think they had multiple big third down conversions, but overall in the game, like, I'm not sitting there thinking, you know, this Dolphins team, like, flat out looked great. Like, and I guess some of these wins against these bigger teams are going to be a little bit, you know, choppy, but there's nothing in this game where I sat there and thought, you know, this was convincing of a Dolphins win. Like, this really showed me that this team is legitimately, you know, they can do it against any other good team because, you know, when you're going up against some of these AFC teams, you're going to be going up against AFC teams that have real defenses. You know, they have, like, their defenses are tough. And don't get me wrong, the Dallas defense is good, but I feel like over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've been kind of downish. You know, they haven't been playing up to their standards. And this Dolphins offense, you know, you walk away with 6 field goals. I mean, does that really represent how great this Dolphins offense has been? You know, I feel like when you go back to that Eagles game, it was kind of similar where, you know, they lost by 11 points or something like that. And they only had one offensive touchdown. And in this game, it didn't look like it was a convincing type of game. They had 3 field goals above 50 yards, 6 field goals on total, one to walk off the game. And I didn't really sit there thinking, this Dolphins team convinces me. I really think now you have the opportunity going up against Lamar Jackson. Like, that's the opportunity right there to put everything to rest. Like, there is no discussion left. If you beat Lamar Jackson and this elite Ravens defense, like, you sit there, you beat him, there's nothing left to say. Like, who can say anything? Because he just beat the Niners. What is there left to say when you beat that team that just beat the Niners? So I think that's where he could really, 2-1, the Dolphins could put everything to rest. But even then, until we get to that point, I'm not convinced, man. We have to get to that point first.
I feel like, these last 3 games or these 3 games are going to definitely tell us if the Dolphins are real contenders or they're not. They got by the Cowboys. Now they got the Ravens and they end their season with the Bills. The last 2 games of the season right here is going to really dictate, hey, once they get into the playoffs, are they one of the teams? If they beat the Ravens, for surely. You know what I'm saying? And if they beat the Bills, it just adds it on cake. Nobody can really argue. But, like, hey, the Dolphins didn't beat any above 500 team or this and that. They just went on a 3-game win streak against 3 tough teams that are all playoff contenders, especially the Ravens. I feel like, hey, you can't really argue that. But to say immediately after beating the Cowboys in this type of fashion, I don't think they're contending, elite contender in the AFC yet. But like I said, it's just one game. I feel like, these next 2 games are going to dictate it a lot. And even if they do come out 2-1 in these next 3, the 2-1 out of the 3 in this gauntlet, I feel like they can compete. Even if they lose to the Ravens, if it's not by a lot and if it's a very close game, there can be adjustments made in the playoffs. And if they get by the Bills, I'll give it to them. I feel like they can contend. So we'll see what happens in the next 2 weeks. Good win. I feel like Tua had a good game against the Cowboys. It wasn't really bad at all. Tyreek been dealing with a lot of injuries. So I feel like, the offense kind of slowed down. But I feel like Tua had a good game. So I'm going to give him that. And on to the Ravens. Show us what y'all about. Let's see what y'all made of right here.
When they lost to Philly, when they lost to KC, when they got their chest kicked in by the Buffalo Bills early on in the year, you guys are just dying for these guys to get 1 win. It wasn't, let's go ahead and get 2. Let's go ahead and get 3 wins. It was just, they just need 1 win. And now they got that 1 win. The conversation is starting to shift a little bit.
So they're contenders.
I mean, for me, they've been contenders the entire season. They didn't necessarily need a statement win from me.
So they were contenders to you when they got beat by those 3 teams.
100%. 100%.
Why is that?
That number one, for starters, that Buffalo Bills game, the game script got out of hand very, very early, and plus they're a division rival. It's a divisional matchup. Like I said,
that makes it even worse. You can't get blown out in a divisional game. That makes it even worse.
And it's going to be the game against Buffalo in a couple of weeks is going to be different than the first matchup when they lost to Philly.
The Buffalo game.
What do you mean?
Is it at Buffalo or is it at Miami?
No, this game's in Miami. The first game was in Buffalo, where they got their chest kicked in, which was completely fair. Buffalo came out and did their thing. Miami just came out flat-footed. It is what it is. They lost that game. Against Kansas City, a lot of things went wrong in that game. Obviously, Tua choking towards the end of that game where he misses Cedric Wilson and the route was completely off. They weren't on the same page. And Tyreek Hill not necessarily having the greatest games. And of course, it is what it is. It was not necessarily a crazy loss. They didn't go ahead and get their chest kicked in by a pretty bad Kansas City Chiefs team. They just lost by a touchdown. It is what it is. We moved off from that. Philly was another close game where I feel like obviously things could have been different if the referees kind of just let the game go out, play how it's supposed to be. A lot of penalties were called on the Miami Dolphins that day. Tyreek didn't have a great day. He had a couple of drop passes that could have resulted in touchdowns. But I pushed all that to the side because I know what this Miami Dolphins team is capable of offensively. Defensively, as of late, these guys have been phenomenal. I think ever since they got back Jalen Ramsey from that ACL injury or that meniscus injury, ever since they got Jalen Ramsey back from injury, their defense has stepped up, and they've taken massive hits defensively. They've lost a couple of guys in that Jets game in New York. I think it was Jalen Phillips. He's out for the season with a torn ACL. And so they've been banged up on that side of the ball. They've also been banged up on the offensive side of the ball, especially their offensive line. Jalen Waddle's been pretty much in and out of the lineup. That guy hasn't finished the game from start to finish fully healthy. He's always picking up some sort of knick-knack injury. But at the end of the day, the Miami Dolphins, they're able to overcome all of that. And in this past game against Dallas showed me everything that I've been trying to preach for a majority of this season up until this point. the Miami Dolphins are capable of going toe to toe with absolutely anybody in this league. They just kind of need things to fall right in the right places for them. Defensively, everything's going right for them on that side of the ball, and offensively too is just doing his thing. Like a couple of weeks ago, obviously he got all the hate in the world after losing to the Tennessee Titans. It is what it is. You brush that to the side. You have to come out and win a game against a very red hot Dallas Cowboys team, even though they lost a couple of weeks ago. It's still a tough matchup. The Dallas Cowboys are a team above 500. They make the list. They're one of the teams above 500, and they've been playing pretty good football for the last month and a half. I want to say, and so the Miami Dolphins did what they were supposed to do. It wasn't in dominating fashion. It wasn't in convincing fashion, but at the end of the day, it's all about the wins and it's all about the losses. And the Miami Dolphins were able to come out of this game with a win, whether or not they had to only kick 4 field goals or just 1 field goal. The Miami Dolphins did what they were supposed to do. They showed everybody that, hey, early on in the season, we lost some games we were supposed to win, or some games just didn't go our way against teams above 500. But this was a game on our schedule that was going to go in our favor. Everything was going to go right for us.
So
now,
if they lose these next 2 games, then does that change your opinion about them?
I mean, I guess we can cross that bridge when we get there. But moving on to this upcoming week versus the Baltimore Ravens, I think this is the final straw for this Miami Dolphins team. I think this is going to be the nail in the coffin for this team, and they're going after this week against this Ravens team. The Miami Dolphins will 100% get the respect that they deserve.
Basically chasing that top seed, right? At this point.
Yeah, I think for right now, yeah.
I think what's the Dolphins' record? They got 10 wins or 11?
9-4. I think.
No, they have the Miami Dolphins are 11-4,
11-4,
11-4, and the Baltimore Ravens sit at number 1 at 12-3, and so. I'm not too sure what the tiebreaker is between these two teams coming out of this week. If let's say the Miami Dolphins win, they'll both be tied at with a 12-4 record.
Probably
head to head is Dolphins, so they'll take that 1 spot.
Oh yeah, you're right. So it'll be the Miami Dolphins. They're pretty much playing for that number 1 seed after this game because I'm not too sure who the Ravens have after this week, but as we all know, the Miami Dolphins do have the Buffalo Bills after this week. They have the Steelers, so a divisional matchup that could go either way. But this is going to be the deciding factor. There's a lot of things that are on the line in this game, not only the number 1 seed and not only the respect for the Miami Dolphins, but that MVP race, man. That MVP race is on the line between these 2 quarterbacks. If Tua beats Lamar Jackson, the guy who's...
Are you throwing Tua in the MVP conversation right now? Are we hearing this?
Why do we still do this, bro? Real talk. Why do we still do this?
I'm going to use the
first goes Dak.
I don't want to hear Tua in MVP conversation when I come back from the bathroom.
We heard Dak. We heard Purdy. Now we're hearing Tua. There's been one guy.
That's just the name. That's just the way things have been going this year.
There's one guy. There's a constant.
It doesn't work like that for Tua.
There's a guy that's a constant. And honestly, there's a second guy. If he wins that Week 18 matchup, honestly, he's my second vote, to push for the MVP. And that's Josh Allen. If he wins out, this season and he finishes the season strong, he's my second vote. But there's one guy that's been a constant all season. His team's been playing the best football in the NFL all season long, responsible for being the top seed in the NFC, and it's Lamar Jackson. He's the guy that's just a constant. I'm not there's just no way I'm seeing Tua as the MVP because we already went through this discussion with a Brock Purdy, and he has better numbers than Tua. There's just no way we're doing this again.
But why aren't we doing it again though? Because it's going off what we've seen this entire season, like we talked about, and like everybody knows across the league, there hasn't been a clear front runner for this award. 1 week it's Dak Prescott, the next week it's Brock Purdy, the next week and now it's Lamar Jackson. In the beginning of the year it was Patrick Mahomes. There's not a real front runner for this award, and Tua's been playing good enough to be considered for this award. And now, if he beats the front runner for the MVP award, that should automatically put him at number 1. We just saw Lamar Jackson do the same thing to a guy that was a front runner for this award, and now he's the front runner going into this week.
Yeah, but the Niners were the best team in football, though, so that makes sense why Brock Purdy was.
So now the Baltimore Ravens are the best team in football, and Lamar Jackson showed he's the front runner for this award. Now, if the Miami Dolphins go out and beat this Baltimore Ravens team, the Miami Dolphins will
The
be
thing is, though, the
tied
talk
for the
of the
best team in
town,
the
the
NFL.
talk was the whole time Purdy and Lamar. That's the matchup. Nobody's bringing up Tua this week talking about he's in the MVP case. Nobody has
I
brought
feel
up
like
Tua.
that's just like
Yeah,
Dolphins fans just
like, I
forcing
didn't hear
him in
Tua
it.
last
Like
week.
honestly,
I
like I
didn't hear
really
Tua
think
top
they
4
would
last
suggest
week. I
Tyreek,
didn't hear
bro.
Tua top 5 last week. The week before that, he wasn't in any conversation. So
I
for
really
him
think that they
to
would suggest
trust it,
Tyreek. Honestly, I
yeah,
really think
it's
that
crazy.
the voters would rather even suggest Tyreek.
Even if Tua has a phenomenal game where it's nothing similar to what he did last year, where he put up 6 touchdowns, but let's say about 350 passing yards and let's say 3 touchdowns, and
I
they beat
mean,
this
we
team.
know who those touchdowns are gonna go to though, and those yardage. So the voters gonna see that and they're
It's
gonna be
crazy,
like,
Tyreek killing, and then you got Mostert with 21 touchdowns. It's like, come on, bro.
We have to understand this is a quarterback award, fellas. This is something we know. We know
but you
this
also
award is going to a
said
quarterback.
this has been a weird season for the front runner. So
100%.
it's not like it's outrageous to think that voters wouldn't consider like a guy like I really think Josh Allen would deserve this award more if he wins out this season than Tua. Like that's just how I feel about how Josh Allen's been playing the second half of this season. These last 4 or 5 games, the way he's been playing. If he wins out this award, to me, even if Tua beats Lamar this week, if Josh Allen's able to win out and he beats Tua in that Week 18 matchup, that's my MVP. No hate.
Well, okay.
It's just
All right. What if Tua wins out and he beats Lamar and he beats Josh Allen?
like you said, we'll cross that bridge when it happens. Simple as that.
That's the thing, man. The hate is not justified.
It's
when it
not
comes to
hate.
Tua, man.
I just think value should come from a guy like who's a real game changer, and I just don't see that in Tua. Like he's a good, solid quarterback, sure. He's just not a game changer to me.
But if he goes out and beats your current MVP frontrunner, I mean, what does that
Like
say
I
about
had
your current
I had the
MVP
same
frontrunner?
thought process about Brock Purdy, and he has better stats than Tua. So outside
of passing touchdowns, I don't think there's a stat that Brock Purdy beats Tua in. But
I mean, I'm
well,
pretty sure like yards per attempt and a bunch of other stuff.
that's all. That's the advanced statistics, man. But I understand that. But at the end of the day, man, I think it's the conversation may change. It isn't. I'm not.
I just feel like that's just Dolphins fans just like trying to force Tua in. It's like the Drewski
because
the Drewski and Westbrook Instagram live and the third dude just hops in. That's the Tua. That's a Tua inclusion, honestly, bro. Get that nigga out of here, bro. I'm sorry.
Hey, man, it's the Miami Dolphins. They just want to be included. Tua just wants to be included in the club, man. But if they win out, they could potentially finish the season with the best record on all of football with the 13-4 record. I think there's going to be some sort of consideration for him. And with the way this season is going, like I said before, it's been a weird season where there hasn't really been a clear front runner. I mean, does Lamar Jackson really deserve the MVP over Christian McCaffrey? I mean, it's a quarterback award. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's our front runner, but if we're arguing for non-quarterbacks, I would probably argue CMC over everybody on this list. Everybody
CMC
on the
had a
MVP
stretch. Like I swear though, during the middle of the season, CMC had a stretch where his yardage was all right. Like it wasn't like crazy. Like I feel like if we had to pick for an offensive player of the year award, like I think we'd pick Tyreek. And if we would do that, then does that really make CMC the MVP? If we would suggest that Tyreek is the better offensive player this year. So
I mean, the thing is, CMC is on pace for 2,000 scrimmage yards and 25 touchdowns. I think for Tyreek, it was more
like
about
start at his Browns, like start at the Browns game and look at his stats till that actually from the Cowboys game all the way to the Bengals game. 51 yards on the ground, 43 yards on the ground, 45 yards on the ground, and 54 yards on the ground. I just feel like Tyreek on the season, if we're talking about offensive players, has probably just been flat out better. Like Tyreek has just been on a complete tear, and injuries are really what's holding him back.
1,600 yards and 12 touchdowns on the year. I mean, he's had his down games too, though. It's just not as consistent as McCaffrey's. It wasn't necessarily a 3-game stretch, but there's some down games on for Tyreek Hill as well. So, but I think the conversation surrounding Tyreek was more just about him chasing 2,000 receiving yards, and now that that is out of reach, where unless he goes absolutely berserk these next couple of weeks, I mean, Yeah, you probably have a strong case to win Offensive Player of the Year, but I think CMC has a strong case as well. But if we're going off of non-quarterbacks, I mean these two guys would be the perfect candidates for this award. But like I said, man, I think there's a lot on the line for this Miami Dolphins team coming into this week, and whether people like it or not, if Tua goes out and absolutely dominates, or he absolutely just outplays the current front runner for this award, which is Lamar Jackson, I think that Monday or that Tuesday, the conversation is going to be a little bit different. Not a lot of people are going to want to listen, but it's going to be a very uncomfortable conversation. But to get back to this overall game for this Miami Dolphins team, man, like I said, they didn't necessarily have to prove anything to me, but I'm glad they proved to the world that they can compete and they can beat a team that's above 500. Now it's about just stringing along these wins as they get into the postseason. They do end the season off with 2 tough matchups. You want to be able to at least come out 2-1 against these 3 teams. So far, you're 1-0. Now you just got 2 tough matchups, one against the divisional rival, and now this upcoming week against the Ravens. And then as you get into the playoffs, every game is just one and done, and you're going to play. You might run into a couple of these teams down the road, and you might have to match up with these guys again. So it's good to get these guys, in their way and out of their way in the regular season. That way, you're more prepared. You don't necessarily want to go into the postseason with a very good record, but nothing to really show for it. No statement win or no convincing winner against a lot of these great teams. But with the Miami Dolphins, man, it's just going to be a wait and see situation. This next week we could be having a different conversation, and the week after that we could be having a different conversation. But of course, as I said before, we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. But sticking on the topic of the AFC, man, we got to talk about this Kansas City Chiefs team. Their struggles have been continuing for quite some time now. I tried to raise the red flag early on in the season, and I officially raised that red flag midway through the season, and now we've reached this point at the end of the season with this Kansas City Chiefs team. The struggles at the wide receiver position, the struggles at quarterback position, the coaching, everything all together offensively just hasn't been good for this team. The Kansas City Chiefs lost to the Las Vegas Raiders on Christmas Day in a game where the Las Vegas Raiders pretty much took the lead to begin the game, and the Kansas City Chiefs pretty much did absolutely nothing to get it back. Patrick Mahomes didn't necessarily have it this day. This isn't a game where I can sit back and say, it's on the receivers. The defense, did what it was supposed to do. Aiden McConnell didn't have a passing yard for 3 quarters after that first quarter. And so this one was just a complete head scratcher. And so, overreaction or not overreaction, the Kansas City Chiefs will be a first round exit come playoff time.
That's not an overreaction. They're going to get sent home, man. They're getting it sent home, bro. Ever since that 5 turnover game against the Broncos, they've been like 20th in offensive efficiency, like 18th in like drop back play. Just every statistic you can think of ever since that Broncos game, they've just been struggling, man. And it's kind of hard to recognize this team at this point. The wide receivers, we already talked about the lack of execution on that end. The offensive line, they've been like the penalties that have racked up in their play, and then Patrick Mahomes hasn't been close to his standards. Travis Kelce looks a bit checked out. This entire team is just lacking offensive identity at this point. They don't have the explosive plays that they used to have. Last year they were supremely efficient at getting the ball down the field. They're efficient at getting the ball to their targets, and you look at this team and it doesn't look recognizable. The quarterback play hasn't been there for Patrick Mahomes as of recently. The coaching, I feel like, has gone criticized a bit too. Andy Reid hasn't been exactly calling the best offensive play calling, and it hasn't been exactly what we were anticipating for this team. We're usually so used to just saying, well, it's Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They're going to figure it out, but they're not going to figure it out, man. They're just going to get sent home first round. There's no question about that. And the defense could only hold them up for so long, but in the modern day NFL, you've got to be able to play well on offense. And being the 20th ranked offense since week 5 or week 6 isn't going to cut it, for this team. And whoever plays them, man, they're going to be thinking, well, it's Patrick Mahomes on that side. We should be scared. And obviously, Patrick Mahomes is a game changer. But the way this team's playing, that they're getting sent home first round, man. Unless they're able to, maybe these next 2 weeks really show us that, hey, that there's still some signs of life in this team. I'm not buying it. They're getting cooked.
Yeah, I think any team takes them out in the playoffs, to be honest. You let Aiden McConnell, he threw 62 pass yards in the first quarter, and after that, there was not a single pass shot thrown, and you still lose. And to me, people are try to blame the receivers and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of it now is they got to go on Mahomes too. The blame's gonna come to him. There's a lot of mishaps. There's a lot of turnovers coming from him. A lot of mistakes. And I mean, your safety blanket, Travis Kelce. I feel like he's on his way out right now. He hasn't been very, very involved in this offense. I feel like he hasn't been the Travis Kelce that we know of the last couple of years. I feel like he's slowed down. He's gotten older. The injuries are taking a toll on him. And then obviously the receiver cast being not too great as well. We've seen Rasheed Rice these last couple of weeks actually show up and be the only receiver to actually get some yards and touchdowns for them. Other than that, nobody else has actually stepped up and tried to be like, hey, I can be the number one receiver on this team. And then it's just, every single week it's the same thing. It's the same thing. When is it going to fix? When is it going to fix? I gave up on that. If they see a team like the Browns in the playoff first round, they're getting decimated. Like physicality wise, they're going to get abused on the offensive side of the ball. Their old line hasn't been great as well. So for me, there's a lot going on. Mahomes, he has to play better, and one of these receivers got to take that next step and be that number one guy next to Travis Kelce to give him some freedom to play and to do what he has to do. But we haven't seen that all year, so I really don't expect that to happen in these next 2 weeks. I don't expect that to happen in the playoffs. We'll see what they do in the offseason.
Definitely not an overreaction for me, but I'm just very glad we've kind of moved off the conversation about Mahomes and his receivers being very bad. We moved off Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore and all of these guys not being able to catch passes. We've put the flashlight. We put Patrick Mahomes under the microscope, and now we're starting to analyze, who Patrick Mahomes really is when these weapons aren't necessarily the greatest. And I'm not going to sit here and say Patrick Mahomes is a bad quarterback. I'm not going to be outrageous and say something like that. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, Patrick Mahomes is the leader of this team, and the weapons haven't been great. But at the end of the day, this is what he has to play with. And we were so comfortable and accustomed to saying things like, it's the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. They'll go ahead and get right back on track. They'll figure this thing out. And as the weeks went by, things haven't changed at all. And Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, they're not playing catch like father and son anymore. That's not that their connection just hasn't been as great as of late. And we've reached a point in the season where there's only a couple of weeks left to the postseason, and you're a team that looks like this offensively. At the end of the day, man, you're going to run into a lot of these teams that are red hot in the AFC, and they're not going to give you a chance whatsoever. At the end of the day, they'll respect you as an opponent. And they'll respect the threat that you are as a quarterback, of course, with Patrick Mahomes. But at the end of the day, man, defensively, the Chiefs got it. I don't have an issue with their defense at all. I think their defense has been one of the best in the league. But you got to be able to put up points, man. A lot of these teams in the AFC can put up points. They can hang 30 on you at any given time, at any given week. And so for this team, man, for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think going into this offseason, they got to go out and try to, go ahead and get themselves a weapon. They got to get themselves a true wide receiver one. A lot of these guys aren't going to cut it. I understand that they want a Super Bowl with a supporting cast like this, but, now it's kind of reached an all-time low. And a lot of it's got to do with, the receiving core just being bad, Patrick Mahomes' play being not up to his standard. But Matt Nagy, being the offensive coordinator for this team, we know Matt Nagy from the Chicago Bears days, and that those days with Justin Fields and that unit, it wasn't good whatsoever. And so, you bring that over to Kansas City, it's a gray cloud over their head, man. So they're probably going to have to move off from Matt Nagy and move into a different direction offensively. But even though it's Andy Reid's offense and he's the one that's calling the shots, you got to be able to get the right guys in the room in order for this thing to go. And so, for this Kansas City Chiefs team, man, they're going to run into a team like the Cleveland Browns, who are led by a guy that was on the couch 5-6 weeks ago in Joe Flacco, but can still ball. The guy that can just come in and do his job and get their playmakers the ball, which is Amari Cooper and David and Njoku. And, this is a team without their starting quarterbacks, a team without their starting running back, but, they're leaning on their defense, but they understand that, their offense has to be able to put up points. They have to be able to extend drives and put some points on the board. And that's what Joe Flacco is doing right now. And so, when you look at the AFC, there's a lot of these teams that are reeling and that are red hot right now. Buffalo Bills, a team that was out of the race 3-4 weeks ago, have found themselves right back in the race. They hold the playoff spot right now. And so it's going to be interesting to see, man, but at the end of the day, I can't sit here and say I'm surprised. I wasn't surprised at the beginning of the season when things weren't going right for this Chiefs team. I'm sitting here and I'm not surprised at all right now. And it's gonna and like I said, it's not an overreaction whatsoever to say that this team is gonna be a first round exit once wild card weekend rolls around, because now the Kansas City Chiefs, for the first time, they're not going to be able to host a playoff game. Well, actually, they might be able to host a playoff game, but there's not going to be an AFC Championship game in Arrowhead, even if they get to that point. And so, it's going to be a different type of atmosphere. It's going to be a different type of run for this Kansas City Chiefs team. And I just don't think they're capable of going on a run like this. But only time will tell. I'm not going to sit here and try to overrate or underrate the situation. I'm just going to sit here and call it how I see it, man. I'm not confident in this Kansas City Chiefs team. I wasn't confident from week 1, and I'm not confident now as we have 2 weeks left in the regular season. But now we go ahead and move on to the NFC. We'll talk a little bit about the Dallas Cowboys. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting here talking about, how great of a team they were, and I still do believe they're a great team. But these last couple of weeks, they've had some tough losses. Now they're on a 2-game skid ever since they beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Cowboys kind of have a theme that's been going over for about a couple of years now, where they're a very, very dominant home team. At home they're one of the best teams in the league. But once they get away from home, they turn into a team that's not as elite as the team as they show at home. And on the road, their struggles continue. Then right now they weren't able to beat a Miami Dolphins team, as we talked about on Sunday. In the playoffs, you're not going to have much home games unless you have the number 1 seed in the NFC, and unfortunately, they don't have that number 1 seed. Now they lost the number 1 seed in the NFC East to the Philadelphia Eagles with this loss to the Dolphins, and it doesn't get any easier for this Dallas Cowboys team as they have to go into. Actually, it might be a home game. They have a home game against the Detroit Lions this upcoming weekend, but it's still a tough opponent. I believe this might be the last game of their gauntlet run. But how confident are we to say that they're a real threat in the NFC? As we know with their current situation with their struggles on the road.
I mean, they're a good team. Don't get me wrong. I think they can put pressure on other teams, and I think they can go up against a lot of these other NFC teams. But the problem is, like you mentioned, if they go on the road, then what does that look like? Because we saw when these guys aren't at home, when you're not comfortable, when the crowd is getting to you and you're going up against opposing teams in their homes, then it's a bit of a different story. Like, we stroll in against the Niners and you're at their stadium, then it's a whole different ball game versus when you're at Jerry's World. Like, I feel like this team, execution wise, these last 2 weeks just hasn't been there. A lot of times, like their first trip to the red zone, the whole fumble that they had, like, that's just a matter of execution. Or Tony Pollard a couple weeks ago when he couldn't get into the end zone. And he's another guy who a lot of people haven't really spoken about this year. A lot of people had him having a monster year, breaking out, but he hasn't been exactly what we thought he'd be. CD Lamb, I'm still eating my words on those. Regarding that guy, he's been balling out, and it's funny. It's coinciding with the same time AJ Brown and Diggs are having their worst stretch of the season, especially someone like Stephon Diggs. But overall, this Cowboys team, I just don't believe in them just because of history. Like, there's some just repeated times where you've seen them at home and they look great. But, you get to the playoff game and they're playing someone else, at their home. They're getting sent home, man. Like, I just feel like the pressure gets to this type of team. They're not a team that I feel confident enough where, they may string out together some possessions where you feel like, okay, they're still good. But at the end, I feel like they're just a team that's going to end up choking. So I don't have much confidence into them. I do think that they have potential, but will they reach that? I don't think so.
Nah, I don't think they're contenders at all. Motherfuckers are flukes. The only good win was against the Eagles, and that's the individual one. They had to get that W. Other than that, they really haven't shown much, and especially Tony Pollard. This guy is completely been asked this year. Especially in that last game where he had, I think it was towards the end of the end zone, like he could have ran all the way to like the pylon, but instead he cut in and said, I want some contact. And he got bullied by that DB. I think it was 31. They just grabbed him with one hand and tossed him back. And I'm like, bro, go outside. You have the pylon, you have the speed, and it didn't work. And I'd said, like, that fumble on the 1st and goal, that 4th and goal, they're running the ball with the fullback, and the ball slipped out, and it's all these small little mistakes that happen. Can you get over that hump of mistakes that have been happening? It happened this year, and it happens last year, and it happens the year before, and it's the same thing over and over again. And maybe one side of the ball is not performing. Right now, it looks like the defense is not performing at all for them. The defense looks like they've been crap the last couple of weeks. They've been giving up points. They've been letting teams march down the field. They let the Dolphins march down the field, get the game-winning field goal. And the week before they got dominated by the Bills. So for me, same typical Cowboys. You know what I mean? If they do face Tampa Bay in the first round, they'll beat Tampa. But after that, I don't see them beating any other team in the NFC. I feel like, when they see the Lions this week, I think the Lions are going to beat them. I feel like the Lions are going to do a number on that defense. They're going to run the ball all over them. And the same case that we're going to come back to, hey, why is the Cowboys team not making this, not fixing their mistakes, or why they're not playing up to the potential? A lot goes on. I mean, some players are not ready for the stars, and I feel like Dak's not that guy, especially when it comes to the playoffs. I feel like he's going to falter. But there's other players on that team that need to step up. Michael Parsons is one of them. I feel like he's been very quiet. People have been trying to say, hey, he's being held, but I really don't see it. It's the same things. Him, although he leads the league in pressures, I feel like some plays he gives up, some plays he quits, and there's some plays that he just complains and says, hey, they're doing this, and he gives up on the play. You got to go 100% every single play, regardless if you're getting held or not. These top other DNs like Crosby and Garrett and TJ Watt, they're all being held. They're all being double teamed. They're all still producing for their team. So for me, Michael always complaining after the game, going on his podcast saying, hey, they're doing this to me and that. It just shows to me that he's really not that type of guy. He's really not that type of guy to take adversity and, push up on it. So for me, they've never been contenders in my eyes. They can have those 10, 11 wins. We predicted that at the beginning of the season, but we know what's going to happen in the playoffs.
I think Abdi brought up a very, very important point that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And it's really just about the Dallas Cowboys execution when they get down there in the red zone. I feel like coming out of this game against Miami, they had the opportunity to go up 14-3 if they just go ahead and punch that ball in it on their opening drive, which would put a lot of the pressure on the Miami Dolphins to respond. But unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. It's a fumble. The Miami Dolphins put up points. I understand that the Dallas Cowboys responded after that, but 7-3 in comparison to 14-3, it's a completely different, type of ball game, and especially with the momentum being in favor of the Dallas Cowboys. You go back a couple of weeks ago when they lost in Philly, or 4 or 5 weeks ago when they lost in Philly, it was the same exact thing where the Dallas Cowboys were getting down there in the red zone, but they weren't walking away with points. They weren't walking away with touchdowns. They're just walking away with field goals. Some of the possessions were empty possessions. And that's the problem for the Dallas Cowboys. And I raised this problem 4 or 5 weeks ago after that Philly game in Philly, where they have to be able to execute when they're down there. They have to be able to come away with touchdowns and put pressure on their opponent. And they just haven't shown us yet that they're able to do that. At home they're able to do it with ease. It doesn't matter who they're playing; they're able to do that. They're able to punch it in and get points on the board. But when these guys go away from home, they have these little blunders from here and there, and these little hiccups where they're supposed to be putting up touchdowns, but unfortunately they're either walking away with no points or they're walking away with field goals. And you want to be able to keep the momentum on your side. And for the Dallas Cowboys, they just haven't been able to keep the momentum on their side whenever they go away from home. And so they're really the only ones that are blocking themselves from their own success. They're really stopping themselves from being considered as these great teams. As we talk about the Baltimore Ravens, we talk about the Niners, we talk about the Eagles, we talk about, obviously these other teams, the Miami Dolphins and things of that, and teams of that nature. We could put the Dallas Cowboys in that conversation if they just finally clean up, on their red zone to execution. They're just not that great. When they get down there away from home. At home, they're perfect, but when they get away from home, those issues just come about where they're just unable to put up points on the board, or they come up with empty drives. And so that's where my issue is with this Dallas Cowboys team, where, at home and in the playoffs, I have no concern. I believe they'll be able to go toe-to-toe with anybody. But, when they go away from home, there's going to be a lot of these mistakes that are made. They're going to cost them down the stretch. And I'm not too confident. I can't sit here and confidently say they beat the Baker Mayfield-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers, man. I think Baker Mayfield's done a pretty good job. And
I don't know about that. I'm not gonna lie, bro. You're hating on the Cowboys now, and I don't even like that. And I don't even like the Cowboys. You guys know me. I don't even like the Cowboys, but I think that the Cowboys beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like I'm confident in that. Like
what makes you so confident?
It's not about these last 2 weeks. I feel like overall in the season, Dallas has played well. Like, we know what they're capable of. Like, we can't confidently sit here and say, well, the Buccaneers have played well, but we've seen what the Cowboys look like on the season, over the course of the season. We saw them beat Philly. a bit ago. Of course, obviously we saw them against the Bills get absolutely destroyed, but they kept a close game against the Dolphins as well. And execution is a problem, but I'm confident that they have the ability to beat a team like the Buccaneers. Like, there's no. My thing is what do they look like when they play against the Phillies of the world, or they go against the 49ers of the world, and then also like instead of the Buccaneers, like I'd be more scared of a team like the Rams. Like that's like I feel like people aren't talking about how dangerous that Rams offense can be. Like I feel like that's a team that nobody sneakily wants to see. It's really the Lions that I feel like you mentioned 3 weeks ago. I feel like they're very fugazi. I don't really believe in the Dolphins and then the Lions as a team, but the Buccaneers. I'm confident the Cowboys would beat them, man. I'm confident, man.
Is that just your hate for Baker Mayfield speaking, or is
No,
that
let
just
me
your
go ahead and say
unbiased
it. Baker
opinion?
Mayfield destroyed us with 4 touchdowns. Absolutely eviscerated. Of course, Joe Barry led defense. No shock there. We gave Bryce Young his best game of the season. But, like, we're just talking about Baker Mayfield on the season. I think he's played phenomenal. Played way, way above their expectations. But at the same time, like, I'm more confident in what the Cowboys are capable of just because of who they are as a defense and how their offense look like on this course of the season.
That's fair.
Yeah,
I'm not sitting here.
that Tampa game is on road too. That'll be on road.
It's on the road. It is on the road. That's true.
Yeah, it's a different story.
I'm still confident, bro. It's
Nah.
Baker Mayfield. It's not Tom Brady back there. We're good.
Baker Mayfield.
We're good.
Baker Mayfield that you just acknowledged is having a great year, man.
Yeah,
So
but it's not
a
Tom
different type
Brady.
of Baker.
Not even just Baker Mayfield. Rashad White been cooking. Mike Evans been eating. The defense actually been okay this year.
It's not Tom Brady back there, man. They don't gotta be that scared, man.
Hey man, this Buccaneers team, they're one of the few dark horse teams that are they're capable of upsetting anybody, man. And it shouldn't even be considered an upset just because they're hosting a playoff game, but just based on their record, of course, it'll be considered an upset when you play a team that's 10-5 or 12-5 and something like that. But for this Dallas Cowboys team, man, as we all know, they just got to be able to fix up on their execution when they get down there in the red zone. And, come postseason time, you're not going to be able to go back and try to fix those mistakes. You got to be able to be perfect or close to perfect if you want to be able to continue week by week, moving on from the wild card round to the second round to the NFC Championship game and ultimately to the Super Bowl. But, they're the ones that are holding themselves back of their own success. They're the ones that are in their way of their own success. It's nothing else that's stopping them. It's really just them that's holding themselves back. But, with 2 weeks left in the season, they do have an upcoming matchup against the Lions at home, which will be another tough matchup, the last one in their gauntlet. We'll see how they look at home. And, ultimately they'll have to go on the road to play a playoff game because they won't be able to have home field advantage unless the Philadelphia Eagles somehow, some way choke this lead that they have on them, which is a game lead. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there as the season comes to a close. Next, let's go ahead and talk about this San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens matchup. A lot of hype coming into this game on Christmas Day. You have the number one seed in the AFC. We're going up against the number one seed in the NFC, the Niners versus the Ravens here in San Francisco, here in the Bay Area. And the Baltimore Ravens went into San Francisco, into Santa Clara, and beat down on the 49ers 33-19. So let's go ahead and get some thoughts from this game.
LJ, man, he came in and he took that MVP away from y'all boy Brock Purdy, man. He stripped that thing from Brock Purdy, And I feel like, Brock Purdy coming into this game, 4 interceptions, no touchdowns. He really wasn't that efficient. The Niners offense really didn't look like they, went into the sway of things. And their defense just looked all out of place to me all night. Other than the first quarter from both teams, very slow offensive game. From after that, it was just 100% Ravens. They were just offensively and defensively all over the field. And, I want to speak up about the Ravens defense. I feel like, a lot of people came into this game and they had Niners winning by 6+, 7+ control in this game, and it was going to be a dominant fashion win for the Niners. But this is one of the best defenses in the league. I can say best defense in the league. I can 100% agree to that. And those guys balled out on that side of the field. They got multiple, probably 2 or 3 All-Pros coming from that team this summer, probably going to make the All-Pro list. You got Kyle Hamilton been balling out, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Matabuke, even Clowney coming in with 8.5 sacks. He's having a restructured season coming to this Baltimore Ravens team. And they were physical, ball dominant. They were ball hawking, causing 5 turnovers on that team, playing phenomenal, making big stops here and there. And Niners just look completely confused on the offensive side of the ball. And we got to speak about my guy Lamar Jackson. That's the true MVP. None of that Tua, none of that Brock Purdy, none of that Dak Prescott. Cam Newton named all them game managers. We know what a game manager looked like, and that's not Lamar Jackson. And, this goes all the way back to the offseason when a lot of teams had the opportunity to sign Lamar Jackson. They put down the phone. They were disrespectful to him, and I feel like he got a chip on his shoulder. He about to make it, his second Super Bowl, about to make it to the second MVP, about to make it to a Super Bowl hopefully this year. And in dominant fashion, he dominated. He made Fred Warner look like a child. He made Chase Young look like kids. He made that secondary look like kids. Zay Flowers had a great game. Isaiah Likely had a great game. The run game was on point. Even Nelson Aguilar, old ass, was cooking those DBs. Like, you got Nelson Aguilar making nice catches in a season like this in an important game. That whole offense was on point. Shout out LJ. I feel like he deserves the MVP. A lot of people have been tossing these rando quarterbacks and systematic quarterbacks into this. I feel like my MVP race has always been Lamar, Tyreek, and CMC. I feel like those three guys, I feel like one of those three deserve it. But LJ coming into this Niner Stadium on Christmas Day and just dominating fashionably like that has a lot to say. I feel like right now Baltimore Ravens are sitting at the number one best team in the league with the best defense, with the best player on the team.
All I'm saying is, man, Cam Newton said that, game manager versus game changer. Now, Brock Purdy's a game manager, according to Cam Newton. He's a guy who makes decisions. He follows the script. He does what's needed. That's great and all, but the game changers are what affect and impact the game on a dramatic fashion. That's exactly what Lamar Jackson did. You saw even when the game was slow, the ability to get out the pocket and move and make plays with his feet. That's the difference between an elite quarterback and a good quarterback. These guys that absolutely change the fragment of the game. Like, everything becomes completely different when these guys step onto the field. And like, when I look at Lamar Jackson, that play against Fred Warner, I mean, Chase Young comes up from behind him. He senses the pressure and ducks, gets out the pocket. He doesn't even look like he's running at 70% speed, 60% speed. He literally looks like he's jogging, and Fred Warner is on his knees already. Like, he could not touch him. It's plays like that change the course of a game. And, Brock Purdy struggled with his defense. His defense balled out. They brought the pressure. And that's what I've been saying about, these type of system quarterbacks is, what do they look like when you have to break structure? And, there has been plays where Brock Purdy, steps out, he makes some plays on the run. But when we're talking about pressure, avoiding sacks, being a game changer like that, he doesn't have that in his arsenal. It's just not who he is as a quarterback. And that's fine. But that's the difference between a guy like him and a guy like Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes. They make plays like that. They're game breakers. And, I just have to shout out Lamar Jackson, man. That's my MVP. He's the guy, like Big H mentioned, the number one, the best player on the best team in the NFL. And the guy who I want him to win the next MVP because he deserves it, in my opinion. When we talk about constants all season long, we saw, Dak come into the MVP race. We saw Tua, into the MVP race. We saw Brock Purdy enter the MVP race. CMC, Tyreek, the guy that's been a constant. We see Josh Allen earlier in the season. We saw Patrick Mahomes early on in the season. And now there's one guy that's just been a constant. It's been Lamar Jackson. And it's an absolute, phenomenal game that he had. They obliterated the Niners and really put the league on notice. Like, hey, we're that team. We're not just some team in the AFC. We're the team. So it was good to see.
I gotta say, as I was watching this game, I just really couldn't believe what I was watching. I couldn't believe, the mistakes that Purdy was making, and a lot of the mistakes, I just more gotta give credit where credit's due to that Baltimore Ravens defense, where they put him in positions to, make bad throws and make bad reads, and some of the interceptions weren't his fault, just unfortunate, and some of them were, obviously. Starting off with that first one, like I said, I believe it just kind of set the tone for the next three to come. That first one was a very, very bad mistake where he just kind of held onto the ball a little longer than expected, and Kyle Hamilton makes a play on the ball, and then after that, he never really found his footing in this game, in a game where he needed to find his footing really fast against a very good team like the Baltimore Ravens, man. So for this Niners team, obviously they kind of got a nice slice of humble pie, man. Nobody was really expecting this. Everyone was expecting a closer affair between these two teams. But even Vegas had the Niners as a touchdown above this Ravens team. And, all the hate and all the hype coming into this game, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens came in and did what they were supposed to do. And not only did they do it, they did it in a dominating fashion. And that they pretty much made a statement out of this game, letting everybody know that, we're a completely different team. And I agree with that. I think when you look back to the Baltimore Ravens team, this Baltimore Ravens team from previous years. Obviously, they've had some good teams, they've had some bad teams, but they've never really been this good on both sides of the ball. It's always been their defense that's kind of been great, but their offense has kind of been up and down. And their offensive coordinator Greg Roman was holding them back, but now it's a completely different look on that side of the ball. And it's Lamar Jackson who's going out there and jogging on the field, and he's not even running at full speed at these guys, and he's still making guys miss. And he's been a better passer as of late, and he's been doing his job as a quarterback, but their defense is doing his job. And for this Niners team, man, they just got this was a good wake up call, because as of late, since they got their get back in Philly, a lot of hype and a lot of talk has been coming out of that team, and I think they just kind of needed a nice slice of humble pie, and the Baltimore Ravens did give him that. So for this Ravens team, man, as we talked about earlier in this episode, they do have a nice matchup at home against the Miami Dolphins, where that's it's a worthy opponent that you got to take pretty seriously. And for the Niners, I have no doubt in my mind that they'll bounce back this upcoming week against the Washington Commanders. But you kind of have to ask yourself going forward, is this who Brock Purdy is when adversity hits? Because not everything is going to be perfect. The defense is not going to be on its A game every single game, and he's had the luxury of just kind of doing what he's asked to do. Playing within the means of the system, but also elevating the system to new heights. Because obviously we've never seen a Shanahan offense ran like this. Ever since his time as a 49ers head coach. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to kind of work outside the system, work outside of the box, to be able to win these type of games. Because in the postseason, as always, you're going to be able to come across teams that you've beat, but at the same time, you never want to have to come across a team that you've beat, because now they have film on you, and so now they have some film that they can go off of, and they can attack you in certain ways and give you different looks. And it's going to be a much tougher matchup than it was the first time around. And I still have no issue with the Niners in the NFC. I still think they're a very good team. I think they'll be able to beat Philadelphia, because Philadelphia still have their issues. I still think they confidently beat the Dallas Cowboys no matter where that game is played. But at the end of the day, they want to win a Super Bowl, and you're not playing a team in the NFC. When you get to that Super Bowl, you're playing a team from the AFC. And if this is what Brock Purdy looks like against AFC teams, where he's not necessarily the greatest, then the Niners pretty much have to kind of look at themselves in the mirror and be like, is this the guy that's going to be able to do it and take us over the top? Because we've seen the Niners get taken to the Super Bowl with Jimmy G under center. And if Brock Purdy gets them to the Super Bowl, I don't think that's necessarily enough, for the Niners to sit back and confidently say, hey, this is our guy moving forward. And, at the end of the day, we shouldn't necessarily look in the market for a quarterback. I think at the end of the day, the main goal is a Super Bowl win, and they have to be able to capitalize on that with this opportunity that they have in front of them, with this type of team, with this type of roster. But I guess, once we get there, once the time comes, we'll see what Brock Purdy's made of. But, it's a trend that we've seen so far this season. When adversity hits for Brock Purdy, these guys aren't able. He isn't able to overcome it. This Niners team isn't able to overcome it. Kyle Shanahan does have a bad record with going into fourth quarters when he's down points, and so it's not looking good for the 49ers in that case. But I still think they're a good team overall. I think if these two teams match up once more in the Super Bowl, hopefully we do get this matchup. If these two teams make it, I do think it'll be a different game. But I'm not going to sit here and confidently say the Niners are the better team, or I'm not going to sit here and say the Ravens are, going to go ahead and win again. It's just kind of only time will tell in that situation, but it'll be a much closer affair, much different outcome in terms of, the Niners and their play. But it is what it is, man. The Niners have to look themselves in the mirror and hopefully, try to bounce back from this one, try to, get the ball rolling back again with only a couple of weeks left in the season. The postseason is right around the corner, and we all know they secured their number one seed in the NFC, so they won't have to go through a wild card weekend to get to where they want to go. But aside from all of that, let's go ahead and move on to our last topic of tonight's episode, and it's Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. The news coming out of Denver today: Denver Broncos and Sean Payton have come out and said that Jarrett Stidham will be the starting quarterback for the remainder of this season upon their loss on Sunday night to the New England Patriots. The Denver Broncos will no longer, have Russell Wilson as their starting quarterback. And this type of news goes all the way back into October 29th to be exact, where the Broncos beat the Kansas City Chiefs to end their drought against them. And a couple of days after that, the Denver Broncos asked Russell Wilson to move his injury guaranteed money from the 2024 season to the 2025 season. And he had to do that by, I believe, at that point, just so for the fourth day of the 2024 calendar year for the football year, he isn't triggered for that $37 million guaranteed. But Russell Wilson said no, and they threatened him. They said that if you aren't able to do this, unfortunately, we're going to have to make you inactive. And Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos after that point kind of go on a tear where they beat the Buffalo Bills on primetime. They beat my Vikings on primetime. They beat a Browns team that was, great defensively, and they still are great defensively. And they start ripping off these wins, and you can't necessarily bench a guy when he's doing everything that you're asking him to do. But now they've reached a point in the season where their offense is kind of taking a toll and is kind of taking a hit, and they aren't necessarily winning games they're supposed to win. But my question to you guys is, do you guys think this is kind of shady? What the Broncos are doing to Russell Wilson?
I mean, like, it's kind of just part of the business, you know. It's why people always tell athletes, like, hey, just remember, at the end of the day, like, this is not just a sport, this is a business, you know. Russell Wilson, just this experiment hasn't panned out for the Broncos like they expected it, and I think a part of the reason for benching him was because of some certain contract stipulations where if he would get hurt, some more of his money would have been guaranteed. But even then, you know, I feel like at this point they're just looking to part ways with Russell Wilson. They're just deciding that, hey, this is the end of it. You know, I remember I mentioned this last year or coming into this season, like, hey, like, they signed Jared Stidham, and I felt like at some point we would have seen him, but Russell Wilson, you know, he did enough to kind of keep him up. At this point, their offense has fallen flat, and they're just looking at it like, hey, like, what can we do from now to get Russell Wilson off our team? That's exactly the thought process going behind this. You know, we're starting off with benching him, and then from there, how do we want to go about this thing? Are we releasing him? Are we trading him? Like, what methods are we taking to get Russell Wilson off our team? And, you know, it's an unfortunate situation, but it is business at the end of the day. You know, Sean Payton, I think, you know, there hasn't been quite a close enough relationship between him and Russell Wilson. And I do believe there was a quote where he mentioned, like, you know, like, I can't just produce a whole new offensive line and wide receivers and whatnot. And it just feels like this relationship can go toxic really fast. And at this point, I think they're just going to cut it and decide, like, hey, we got to move in a different direction because this isn't what we're expecting it to be.
Nah, shiesty business has been done. Very shiesty business. Not good business has been done. You put that, you know, knowingly that you signed him into that contract with the guarantee about him getting injured. You know, it's already in the contract, and then you ask him after he beats the Chiefs, "Hey, can you not take this out your contract and still be our starting quarterback?" Imagine if he got hurt that next week. How would he feel? You know, not to get that guaranteed money, and he's putting his body on the line out there for your team. And I don't respect Sean Payton at all because I feel like Sean Payton always had it out for, you know, Russell Wilson. And I just, you know, every time there's a mistake been made or something has happened, Russell Wilson is getting blamed. And it's Sean Payton coming out forcefully blaming him, or he's on the sideline yelling at him for a mistake that's probably not his issue. Or maybe it could be the old line's issue or receiver's issue, but he's never pressing them. He's never pressing them. It's always Russell Wilson's fault, Russell Wilson's fault, Russell Wilson's fault. And I feel like, you know, throwing him under the bus for your team's mishaps, it's not really him. It's 100% everybody. It's 100%, not 100% him, but it's everybody around him as well. It's a collective as a group. And I got to blame Sean Payton as a head coach. If your team's not successful, you're part of that blame. And I feel like he just try to throw, you know, scapegoat Russell Wilson, try to get him off his team and be like, oh, like, we can start fresh. But I just don't see that happening. I just don't see them picking up another quarterback that wants to come into that type of atmosphere and build with Sean Payton. I feel like he's a cancer in that locker room. So to me, them, you know, asking him to cut that guarantee in October and still ask him to be their starting quarterback at that time is very shiesty. It's very disrespectful. So whatever they got going on right now, you know, Russell Wilson, I feel like he's getting thrown under the bus. I mean, obviously, the last couple of weeks, the offense hasn't been looking good or the team hasn't been looking good, but we know that since the jump of the season. They're always going to be up and down, up and down, up and down. But the 100% forcefully try to blame him and to say, hey, we're going to cut you in March and threaten him like that early on in the season, that's bullshit. Very bullshit. So to me, shiesty business is happening.
I 100% agree, man. I think this is definitely shady on behalf of the Denver Broncos organization, because at the end of the day, when you look at it, these guys were the ones that went after Russell Wilson. They didn't have to enter themselves in the sweepstakes. They didn't have to make a trade with the Seahawks to go ahead and get Russell Wilson to be their guy. They could have just sat back and said, hey, we'll go ahead and look in a different direction, whether that's the draft or that's the free agency market. But no, they went ahead and swung for the fences. They traded a boatload of assets to go ahead and get Russell Wilson. And not only did they do that, they went ahead and gave him a lot of money to be their starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. Now, things haven't gone as planned for the Denver Broncos, and that's fine. At the end of the day, some things just don't end up working out. And if you want to move off from Russell Wilson, that's one thing. But doing it in the way that they're doing it right now, in this type of fashion, where they're threatening him, saying that they're gonna make him inactive, that's a completely different thing. And now, obviously, they're going to cut him in March, and they're going to be able to move off from Russell Wilson. But the way they're going about it is just the wrong way. It's just wrong completely. Because at the end of the day, the season isn't necessarily over. We've seen this type of story before, in Las Vegas, where Derek Carr was completely healthy, but they went ahead and wanted to just do the same thing, where they started Stidham and for the rest of the season, and they just kind of played it out with their season pretty much being over at that point. But at the end of the day, like, if it's like I said, you move out from Russell Wilson, it's fine, but you don't necessarily want to threaten him and force his hand, uh, especially a guy that you need to lead your team to go ahead and get you these wins to compete in the AFC. I mean, they haven't been pretty bad this last month and a half, these last couple of weeks. You know, they have some questionable losses where the offense just hasn't been able to produce, especially this past week against the Patriots on Sunday night. But it is what it is, man. This is kind of what you have to expect with this Broncos team, man. You know, obviously their defense has been, it's stepped up since the beginning of the season, and they're a huge factor, a huge reason why they went on that win streak. And Russell Wilson pretty much being a game manager throughout this course of this season, just doing the job that he's asked of. And at the end of the day, obviously you can part ways and still be okay with how, both parties. There's no negativity or hate between the two. But now it's just like, as a franchise, how are you going to be able to attract superstars aside from the contracts standpoint, where obviously you want to be able to treat your players and treat one of your own right. This is pretty much business in bad faith. And for Russell Wilson, I'm completely on his side in the situation. Why would I want to put my injury guaranteed money, push it back for a year, knowing that I can get injured at any given moment? This offensive line, they're not a huge fan of me, and they're the ones that are going out there and protecting me. But they don't. What if they just don't do their job? What happens if they just let me die out there in the backfield? And this team has a lot more issues than just Russell Wilson being not being the quarterback that they hoped and expected him to be once they got him. And so for this Denver Broncos franchise, man, I mean, I'm not too sure where they go from here, because Russell Wilson's not going to be your starting quarterback next year. You probably go into this draft looking for a young quarterback, but you lost all of those assets. You're still going to owe Russell Wilson $40 million in guaranteed money, and so they're still coming out as the biggest losers in all of this. Now the question is, Russell Wilson and his new potential home going into next season. What are some options out there for Russell Wilson, and where does his future lie as a quarterback in the NFL?
I can see a team like the Steelers or the Patriots going for him, especially like the Steelers. I feel like they need some sort of veteran quarterback at this point that has still some juice, that still has some ability, some leadership in the locker room, especially for a team like that. They haven't really been able to invest into the draft correctly with a quarterback. They haven't landed on one, since Big Ben has retired. So they're kind of just looking for something to stabilize them. Perhaps a team like the Patriots, but, they're probably going to look to get a young quarterback, especially in this upcoming draft. But I definitely see the Steelers going for him.
For me, I mentioned Atlanta. I mentioned Pittsburgh. To me, I think that's no other team. I feel like those two teams, other than Atlanta, might go on for Justin Fields. Other than that, I feel like it's a good offense for Russell Wilson. I think he can game manage that offense, especially with the talent they have with Kyle Pitts, good old line. They got Drake London. They got two phenomenal running backs. I feel like it's a good offense for him right there. I don't know about the coaching situation, but they got a talented offense on that side of the ball. And I feel like Russell Wilson can game manage that team. And then Pittsburgh, for me, I don't know. I feel like Pittsburgh he probably had the same struggles. I feel like Pittsburgh, their O-line is not that great. The run game, to me, is not that great. And, I mean, they have two good receivers, Deontay Johnson and, George Pickens. But I feel like that'd be the same with Cortland Sutton and Judy. I mean, it's no difference, really. I feel like Atlanta's more tapered for him. So, for me, Atlanta would be number one option for him on my side. But Pittsburgh, Patriots, yeah. Other than that, I don't see any other team.
Do you guys think there's a chance going into next season where Russell Wilson is not a starting quarterback in this league?
I think he's a little too talented for that. Just enough still.
There's some ass quarterbacks in this league that are starting, especially Derek Carr.
Like, we see guys like Desmond Ritter start, bro. Like, this league is fine.
And Sam Howell, like guys like that starting, Zach Wilson
There's enough
starting.
bad quarterbacks going around or even you see a guy like Joe Flacco step up. Like, there's enough situation where Russell Wilson can be a starter somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So
I can see that. I could definitely see it. I think there's like a slight chance for me when it comes to Russell Wilson and being a legitimate starter, because when you look at a lot of these teams already either have their franchise guy or they have a rookie that's going into their second year as a starting quarterback in the NFL. So there's pretty much no need. There's a handful of teams that are going to look into the draft to go ahead and try to get their new franchise quarterback, and so there just might not be any room for a guy like Russell Wilson in this league, but as a starter, but potentially as a backup role. But I personally still can't see it. Russell Wilson, I still don't think he's fallen off that bad, but it just hasn't been the Russell Wilson of old. But only time will tell. I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see on that. But with that being said, any final words before we sign off here?
Man, these next 2 weeks or whatever for these playoff odds, man, it's looking spooky, looking scary.
I feel good.
Just don't lose one. That's all I'm saying. Don't lose one.
I feel good. Y'all got JJ coming to town with no Jair this week, right?
Bro, we're good, bro. Trust.
I'm hearing Jair like he's not playing. We know when Jair didn't guard JJ last time, he dropped 180 yards.
As long as these guys have an ass quarterback, we have a chance, man.
Minnesota gonna help me this week.
They got a trash quarterback, man.
Minnesota gonna help me this weekend. I cannot wait.
No, bro.
We're gonna see though, man.
I'm not gonna lie to you guys, man. I can't hear a single word you guys are saying right now. Due to some technical difficulties, but I'll go ahead and rewatch this conversation and see where you guys are talking about. But I'll go ahead and just close out this episode here. But with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. We really appreciate your love and support. We'd really appreciate it if you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at New Media Podcast. And for those of you that are watching us on YouTube, all of our social media handles will be at the end of this video. And if you're listening to us on Apple and Spotify, if you go to our Instagram page at New Media Podcast, you'll be able to navigate yourself to all of our social media handles there. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Seeing now late, now that's overkill.